So we are here in this beautiful place of Swamiji's Samadhi, where Sudhirji will give us a bit of a history behind it. Namaste and welcome to Sundays with Kaivalyadhama. Namaste Sudhirji, and thank you so much for your time.
Namaste and namaste everyone. Glad to be here.
Where yoga tradition meets science. Sudhirji, I'll start by directly asking you the reason why the tagline was created in the first place.
I would call this statement the essence of Kaivalyadhama. It truly embodies the character of Kaivalyadhama. Kaivalyadhama being a meeting place, a crossroads where tradition, I would say yoga tradition, comes together with modern science. So it's the essence of the character of Kaivalyadhama. And as we go along in our conversation, I think this meaning will further unfold.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And it is truly the essence. As being a student of Kaivalyadhama and having had the opportunity and the privilege of traveling the world and not only teaching traditional yoga, but also being a student of different forms of yoga, and as a practicing athlete or sports person, I have found a massive benefit from actually doing the traditional yoga classes, especially now when I'm at the ashram. And I feel when I've done my 10 Ks of cycling, my 1 hour of gym, and my body is ready to pack. I do my therapy class in the evening and I feel rejuvenated. So I'm sure there is a lot to it on how it can basically help me recover in an hour.
Sure. I mean, that's a very pertinent question. Coming back to me, myself, growing up in Kaivalyadhama, we are just fortunate to be taping this event here because this place is the essence of Kaivalyadhama. Right behind us is Swami Kaivalyananda's Samadhi, and behind him is his first student Samadhi, Swami Digambarji. So it all basically started here. My memories of this place go back to when I was 2 or 3 years old. There was no cover on the Samadhi. There were ashes. And my dad used to hold my hand, my sister's hand, and we used to come every morning, take the ashes of Swami Kaivalyananda, place it on our forehead. Now, when it comes to traditional yoga and its application to the modern sports culture, so you must know, you must be very well aware, we have cardiovascular, then we have aerobic, anaerobic kind of exercises, weightlifting, anaerobic. Now, what happens is, I've been in the industry for some time myself, working at a food supplement industry, natural supplement industry. So what ends up happening is, I'm not going to go into detail because you know that part very well. When it comes to sports, high impact sports, what happens? There's a lot of wear and tear on the body. Say, for example, you're a jogger. At 17, you're good and nice. When you're 60, then your knees start to talk. Now, that's the long-term effect. You're a bodybuilder. Now, what happens in bodybuilding? It's a very fantastic sport. It's a very fantastic curriculum looking at building strength, building muscles. But how do the muscles build? Muscles build by tearing. Unless you tear your muscle, they won't build. Now, when you tear your muscles, what happens? I've seen that with a lot of bodybuilders, Mr. Olympias, the immune system goes down. And I've seen firsthand that they become prone to coughs and cold. Now, high impact exercises, what they also do, they increase your lactic acid levels, which causes soreness. So when you come to yoga as such, which is nothing but passive stretching, it ensures, number one, at the external level, at the muscular level, that the lactic acid production is managed very well. And when it comes to the immune system per se, now I must have said it so many times in my past lectures, yoga is looking towards strengthening your internal organs. Without a healthy liver, a good bicep means nothing. So when you build from the inside out, then you can call it a total workout. So yoga adds that dimension to the modern workout scenario.
So moving on with our conversation on the importance of traditional yoga. The mental, the spiritual, and the psycho-spiritual part of traditional yoga is an important part, right? Can you guide us a bit on how traditional yoga incorporates that into our yoga practice?
Sure. Again, going back to what I may have said in this talk or my earlier talks for the viewers, one thing I'd like to be very clear about. It is unfortunate that we have to talk about traditional yoga as a subsection of yoga and pool it with what we call different kinds of yoga. Now, this concept is a product of last 50 to 60 years. 60 years ago, there was only one yoga. It was called yoga. And it was implied it was traditional yoga. And what was not traditional was not considered to be yoga. I'd like my viewers to get this point very, very straight. Because nowadays, unfortunately, traditional yoga, this yoga, now that's giving validity to a lot of non-yogic disciplines. And that is injustice. But accepting, okay, there is traditional yoga, now trying to build up on that. And I'm not going to make it very complicated. As Swami Kaivalyadhama has defined yoga, yoga is the integration of one's personality, which makes a human being a better human being. That's it. And you cannot become a better human being unless you introspect. And this going inside is the ultimate goal of yoga. That's what we call spirituality. Spirituality is nothing but a journey into self-discovery. Now, the other day in my asana talk, I mentioned, in the yogic system and non-yogic system of India, it is very well believed, as Mahakavi Kalidas, one of the great poets, had said, Sharir Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam, the body is the primary means, instrument to achieve this integration. By body, I mean not just the physical body, but the body, mind, intellect, and beyond. So in order for us to achieve the spiritual goal, in modern language, we say body, mind should be primed. This priming to the psychophysiological aspect then becomes the primary goal for yoga, so that you can achieve the spiritual goal. So I hope I touched on what you're
Yes.
looking for.
Yes. So, Sudhirji, there's a lot of conversations now, online and offline, on is traditional yoga applicable in today's day and age, or is it passe? And if you are following traditional yoga, or you're following the Ashtanga yoga, traditional Ashtanga yoga as we call it, how would it benefit you in today's day and age? Isn't a tradition also about evolving and keeping up with today's day and age? And is traditional yoga applicable? I ask this as a viewer, as a student. I know the benefits of traditional yoga, having practiced both ends. So, yeah, if you could give us a bit of an insight into the application of traditional yoga in today's day and age.
Sure. When it comes to traditional yoga, I've also been seeing in the last 20 years this very concept of tradition being challenged. People sometimes say, oh, traditional yoga is old, it doesn't apply to today's world. There are conversations about, how some sections have kind of taken a hold just because they can speak Sanskrit. I mean, the texts were written in Sanskrit, not in English. So, I mean, we are helpless there. You have to know Sanskrit to do justice to the texts. Literal translations don't work. And when it comes to the application, the validity of traditional yoga in today's day and age, we have to keep in mind that traditional yoga is eternal. It is not confined by time, the knowledge within. And the reason I say that is because it deals with the human being as a whole. It deals with human emotions, it deals with human thoughts, and it deals with what's beyond, what's giving energy to these thoughts and what is giving energy to these emotions. Now, human emotions in ages have not changed. People have gotten angry, and 10,000 years ago, they used to get angry. People are now envious. They were envious 10,000 years ago. People were anxious 10,000 years ago. People are anxious now, because all these are mentioned in the yogic text, Yoga Sutras. Now, the cause for anxiety, the cause for stress may have changed. Maybe 10,000 years ago, a lost cow would give you anxiety. Now, workplace gives you anxiety. So, although the external environment has changed, the internal responses have not. And the tradition deals with the internal responses, how to manage. Now, to your question, is it applicable? Because it's old. Now, the beauty of yoga is the very reason that yoga still survives is because it has adapted very well. But the principles of yoga have not changed. Now, sometimes, a lot of times when people challenge this notion of tradition, I don't think they understand the meaning of tradition. They just see tradition as Sanskrit chanting, Sanskrit instructions, asanas being done in particular way, or instructions being given in a particular way. No, when it comes to yoga, that is a part of tradition. But a very common example I give you is of baking a muffin. When you bake a muffin, what do? You have the batter. You mix the batter at a certain consistency. Then you add whatever you have to add to it. Then you put it in an oven. And you put an oven into an oven for at a particular temperature. and then you keep it in the oven for a particular amount of time. And the product that comes out is a muffin. So you have the consistency, you have the temperature, and you have the duration. Now, in terms of yoga, that is the principle that you call a tradition, because without these three things, muffin is not possible. If you dilute the batter a little bit more, instead of muffin, it becomes a pancake. If you keep it in the oven longer at a higher temperature, instead of a muffin, it becomes a cookie. Now, this principle of muffin making, where the temperature, duration, and consistency can never be changed, no matter you were doing it 10,000 years ago or now you're doing it now. In order to make a muffin, these three things are important. Now, the same concept of tradition applies to yoga. Yogic principle. And for those of you who are keen on knowing this before, in Kaivalyadhama, we have a very good textbook called Teaching Methods, which was written by Dr. M.L. Gharote and Dr. S.K. Ganguly. And it very nicely discusses the yogic principles. What makes these practices yoga? So that is the reason tradition is timeless. It's beyond time. No matter when you practice, you cannot practice yoga without tradition. So yoga has evolved in time. We don't know when was this science conceived, but we do know that there's a specific date when this science was written on whatever you may call, whether it's a stone, leaves, paper, those dates we have. But since the conception of yoga until now, this very movement, and in the future, what will continue is what we call tradition. Because that's the fundamental of whatever we are learning today, whether it's yoga as in yoga or something that looks like yoga, would not have been possible without tradition. But what has tradition become today? So I'm reminded of a story of a great master, and the master's name was Mullah Nasruddin. And Mullah had two students who in their own right became very famous yoga gurus. But they had a slight enmity in between them. They were running the best schools in town. Now, with regards to a particular asana, say school A of this teacher did that asana sitting, and school B of another student, meaning another teacher of this Mullah Nasruddin, was doing the asana standing up. And their students were consistently fighting. A said, no, my technique is traditional. My way of doing is traditional. B said, no, my way of doing it is traditional. And sometimes the temperature was so high that it used to come to blows. Yogis hitting each other. So the two teachers, they said, okay, let us resolve this. So then let's go to a great teacher, Mullah Nasruddin. So they went into Mullah Nasruddin's house. Mullah Nasruddin was sitting, he was meditating. They woke him up. They brought him out of meditation. And they said, Master, we have a big issue to resolve. Mullah says, okay, go ahead. So first came the teacher from school A. He says, in my school, we do this asana sitting. Is that the tradition? Mullah said, no. Now, the teacher from school B, who was also Mullah's student, from inside became really excited. Now, this is not tradition. Mine has to be tradition. Then he asks Mullah, Master, we in our school do the same asana standing up. Is that the tradition? Mullah says, no, that is not the tradition. Now both students looked at each other perplexed, and then they frustratingly yelled out at Mullah, Master, what are you saying? This is not tradition, that is not tradition. Our students are fighting and yelling at each other about it, saying this is tradition, that is tradition. He said, well, that is the tradition. So this bickering, I am right, mine is tradition, has become the tradition. Huh? And that begs a question to us, that asks us a question: what is tradition? How do we understand tradition? Is it clear?
Yes, and that's a very profound answer, and that pretty much sums up uh, the importance of traditional yoga. For example, the benefits you get from traditional yoga is because of a system, right? It's because of a procedure. So if you're going to claim that you want to get that benefit, you will by default have to use that procedure or that system.
Exactly.
So what is happening now is a lot of people are saying they're doing yoga or traditional yoga, hoping that they would get that benefit, but they're changing the formula. And that, I think, is where the disconnect is.
Yes.
And that's where the risk is of how you could maybe not do the right thing for yourself by not following the traditional protocol. For example, talking about cardiovascular or VO2 max, it would come as a surprise to many students that pranayama can actually help you improve your VO2 max in a similar or better way as doing high-end cardiovascular exercise. So could you give us an insight on how fantastic these two things marry each other?
See, I can tell you very clearly. For example, I'll give you a few examples, right? Heart rate, cardiovascular, Kapalabhati. In doing Kapalabhati, your heart rate increases 20 to 40%. But your resting heart rate goes down. You get the benefit without taxing your joints. Now, what's popular these days? Weight loss. Everyone's looking for weight loss. People are running, dieting, so on and so forth. One simple asana, shoulder stand, Sarvangasana, it balances the thyroid function. Now, weight gain predominantly, mostly happens, of course, uh, because of thyroid malfunction, slow thyroid function, and then there are other factors also, but primarily that. Now, there's nothing better than Sarvangasana and Matsyasana or half Matsyasana to balance the function of the thyroid. That's the reason I say yoga deals with the organs, the glands, and the systems, not with the phasic and peripheral muscles. So this is how you can make sense out of it.
Yes.
And to another question of yours, when you talk about tradition, it's only lately that a lot of people have started criticizing a lot of mainstream newspapers, yoga related injuries, yoga related problems. There are no yoga related problems. Perhaps people are doing it wrong. People are doing it in what we call the modern styles. Kaivalyadhama has been here for almost 100 years. Kaivalyadhama, Mumbai, I would say 90 years. Not one case of yoga related injury. Why? Because you do it properly.
Because you're following the system.
And once you once you start to glorify your body, glamorize your body, then these things happen.
That's fantastic. And I would definitely vouch for that. And for all you viewers who are stuck in the rat race of losing weight or losing fat, yoga cuts the chase, simply put, and gets you to a state where your hormones balance out, thereby giving you the easiest and the best way of coming into the best body shape that you ever want. So Kaivalyadhama has a scientific and philosophical research department where there's ample of research done on the benefits of traditional yoga, or let me put it this way, on the benefits of yoga on mankind. We have a few series coming up on SRD, so please tune in and watch the fantastic research material we have from over 100 years. And in saying that, when you go into the SRD department and you look at the research equipment they have, I think it would put even modern scientific research departments to shame. And that too, how many years back was this? Could you
Sure.
give us a heads up on what and what
Sure.
year?
Sure. So let's start with the basic, because it's very important for the viewers to get this point right. Yoga as a science, as I said, has been a very old science, ancient science, timeless science. And at every single point, it has been put to test by virtue of what advanced science was prevalent at that time. Even within Ayurveda, there was surgery, there was marma therapy, other forms of therapy. So yogic practices were put to test from a point of view of Ayurveda. No matter what system you have, even if you take the Chinese, traditional Chinese medicinal system, there's more research going on there, and yoga is coming through even from modern Chinese perspective. Now, as I normally mention, with time things get diluted, concept get diluted. That's not a mistake of a person, but that's an inherent flaw in communications. And being having done an MBA, this was a course that we did, business communications. So there's inherently a flow when a concept or a message passes from the one person to the other to third person, it gets diluted. And unfortunately, that started happening in India in the early 1900s, when a lot of concepts of gymnastics, physiotherapy, alignment creeped into the yogic culture, which were basically Western concepts. And in the West, yoga started to be called stretching exercise, pranayam started to be called deep breathing exercise. Now there had to be a correction that was had to be made. So our great Swami Kaivalyadhama, who again I keep saying he was not brand conscious. He wanted to make sure that people understand what yoga is. What he did was he said, okay, Maharishi Patanjali has given us a protocol where he defines the practice, he gives us the technique of the practice, and then he gives us the outcome of the practice or practices. He said, can we validate the outcome based on modern science? Now, that thought created Kaivalyadhama. But soon Swamiji realized that scientific research is not enough, because if one has to do a practice, how would one do a practice? Nowadays, you see different versions of Kapalabhati, people breathing through the mouth, people jumping and doing Kapalabhati. Is that validated? Does it have a textual reference? So what Swamiji said, we need techniques that are yogic. Now, who to turn to? Turn to ancient yogic texts, which were in form of manuscripts. So he decoded the manuscripts and outlined the techniques of asanas and pranayam in its truest sense. Now, with those techniques, he put those techniques to test using modern science. So that's the reason, say, where modern science meets yoga tradition. Yoga traditional meaning what's been described in the text. The techniques that have been described in the text were validated by science. Now, my personal appeal to researchers all around the world, even in Kaivalyadhama, we have SRD, Scientific Research Department, PLRD, Philosophical Literary Research Department is, especially the Scientific Research Department. The techniques that need to be used have to be validated by traditional texts. Otherwise, anyone can invent any technique. My brother, the other day, he got a call. Subodh, you must know. He got a call from a lady saying that she started doing Kapalabhati and her blood pressure went up. And the first question my brother asked was, Are you doing it watching TV? Some popular people? And she said, yes. He said, stop it immediately. So you have to have technical validation as well as scientific. And that's the meaning. Tradition of yoga meets science.
Very important and wise words. And in saying that, we say thank you to all the viewers. Thank you, Sudhirji, for your time.
Thank you. Thanks
Tune,
for watching.
tune in for our next episode coming shortly. Namaste and have a great day. So, we are here in this beautiful place of Swamiji's Samadhi.